Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. This is Garrett Goggin, Silver Stock Analyst. Today we have Dr. Mark Cruz with New Pacific Metals joining us. Hey Mark, how you doing?
Morning, Garrett. Very well, thanks. And yourself?
Good, we're great. You guys have had a very interesting story over the past couple of years. I'm really excited that I'm going to have a chance to touch base with you and, get a video out there on YouTube. You guys just had some recent drilling results released, right? And that was on the Silver Sands property. That was just infill drilling, right?
Yeah, correct. These are our 4 metallurgical holes that are giving us sufficient sample to help, design the processing plant for the next phase of the project.
Okay, excellent. And it was the same sort of results as you've seen, the past couple of years. It was wide widths up to 280 meters, and it was about 130 grams per ton.
Exactly, yeah. We drilled 4 separate parts of the deposit as currently defined, just to give us a broad spread of samples, just to make sure they're representative. Yeah. And we drilled these, they're called twin holes, within about 5 or 6 meters of a prior hole. So what it does show is at a very small scale, we're getting good to excellent continuity. So we know, at a micro scale, the veins are holding together. We knew at a macro scale, that's the deposit, so that's good. So not a lot of variability, which is actually very important for the plant. And again, like you said, big broad intervals, call it, anywhere between 100 to 150 grams per ton silver, and then obviously higher grade zones within that as well.
Right. Okay, that's great. That sounds good. They look like good results like the previous couple of years. New Pacific, you basically were established in, 2017, basically, with Ray finding a piece of property over there in Bolivia. Can you go over the background, the backstory regarding, how the company came about?
Sure. Well, firstly, I'm relatively new to the company, but New Pacific itself has been around since certainly early 2000s, probably 2008, 2010. Originally, its main focus was on Canada, so certainly sticking to the Americas and on precious metals. So we have and still have a precious metal property in the Yukon, clearly not material to us now. In 2017, there was a submittal in the door for a silver asset in Bolivia. And to be honest, it kind of probably sat fallow for a while. And then our VP Exploration, Alex Ang, took a look at it. Certainly liked what he saw. Obviously, lots of historic workings and lots of evidence of a large mineral system. And, Ree and the team headed down there, subject to due diligence, and ultimately were successful in acquiring the asset.
Right. And you paid about $40 million for it, right?
That's correct, yes.
Right. And Silvercore right now, they own 30% of you?
A little bit shy, yeah, 28.5%.
28.5, okay. And that relationship, they're like an affiliated party, right? With New Pacific?
Please, no, go ahead.
No, they're an affiliate party, not necessarily an investor, right?
No, they are. They're our largest shareholder, larger investor. Our board, Ree sits on our board, obviously as a Silvercorp nominee. Obviously, so he's very supportive. Largest shareholder, represents the largest shareholder.
Right.
As was a Pan American representative as well. So certainly very large shareholder. Obviously, they've been mining and active in precious metal space for a lot longer than New Pacific. So I think just having that support there and that depth of experience from the Silvercorp side, when it's required, is certainly very advantageous for us. But, day-to-day operations, we are a fully standalone management team.
Right.
And we have been building the team up, as we transition from that exploration phase now into more development and exploration, I guess, at this point.
Okay. And, Pan American likes the property also. They're 10% owners of New Pacific.
That's correct, yes. Yep.
Yep. And then Ree alone owns 7% of it. So that's like 40% of the float.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So certainly I think what I think is encouraging, you've got 2 major players in silver space, the world's largest, which would be Pan American,
right,
and obviously Silvercorp as well, a very large producer that like the asset and are long-term shareholders. So I think that's a great vote of confidence in the project and the team.
Yeah, it's a huge vote of confidence from Pan American. And, the way I see it is, the project came about, the vast majority of these projects, they don't work out. So Silvercore, owns a tremendous amount of the shares. And, you've been successful from drill hole number 1, basically. And you've proved out this resource very quickly in 2 years. And the company is just reaching maturity, and it's just growing, and it's taking care of its governance issues. It brought you on a few months ago, right, to take it it to its next stage of production, to get it in production, and taking care of the board, and it's growing pains, right?
Yeah, I think it's just normal. Any call it a micro juniors phase of evolution. And what is different is, it's a 1 in 1,000 chance to find something that could be potentially economic, perhaps higher. And under Ree and New Pacific, I mean, the guys did it in the first go around, which is absolutely incredible. Since then, and you're right, I mean, pretty much from the first hole or the first few holes, the team knew they were onto something pretty special. And it was all hands on deck, so it's effectively been 50,000 meters a year drilling, 4 rigs for the last 2 years back to back. So clearly all the effort went into the deposit, as it should have, and now there's a little bit of catch up in the background, but certainly we are there, and so not of a major concern to me.
Right, correct. Yep, that's exactly the way I see it too. And then, the Silver Sands concession, there's been talk of, the Silver Sands concession, and then you have the MPC concession, right? That's basically 7 times the amount, the area of your Silver Sands concession. And there's been talk about that regarding the negotiations with the Evo Morales government and the Minister of Mines. And it's just, I don't know, I just find it ironic because, Evo Morales came into power in 2006 in Bolivia. And at that time, everyone was worried about Evo going to take over all the mines. So all the mining companies got hammered. But then that didn't come to play because Bolivia needs the mines, they need the tax, they need the jobs. So what happened is the miners, they recovered, and then you guys came around and you guys negotiate with this government in order for the MPC concessions, and now they're coming after you regarding that. It's just, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the elections up there. Not really sure how it's going to play out. But, the be-all, end-all, like Silver Sands is a good concession. Right? And MPC, is a negotiation that you're going to have to conduct with the new government.
Yeah, I think a key thing to explain, and there is some confusion out there and we get it, is, when we talk about the Silver Sand deposit and the Silver Sand project, we're talking about 100% owned New Pacific property through our Bolivian subsidiary, Minera El Sierra. All the published results, the deposit, the current resource estimates out there is all on 100% owned ground. And we will get into it maybe in this conversation or later on in the year. So that's the main block, what we call the main block, or the south block of the Silver Sand project. And we've also got another block of ground to the north, about 4 kilometers away, which has some very promising targets that we hope to drill, called El Bronce, in the latter half of the year. But certainly all work to date has been focused on 100% our own ground. We do have an agreement with Comibol, you're right, for the mining production contracts. That's the surrounding area. So that takes us from currently we have about 6 square kilometers ourselves. And then if we add in the MPC ground, it takes it up to about 57, 58 square kilometers. So quite a large project area. And really, all that's waiting for is ratification by Bolivian Congress. That was, prior to my time, that was advancing along that pathway. Obviously, late 2019, there were elections. The rest is history. So really now it's a holding pattern until, the elections are held sometime later this year and a new government goes in. But I think what is encouraging is, regardless of what party or president was there, the verbiage is still the same. I mean, Bolivia wants and needs foreign investment. Bolivia is a resource country. It understands resources. And the mining laws, when they're updated, most recently in 2016, certainly put in place additional measures that gave additional protection to, private ownership of mining assets. So that really has been unchanged ever since the initial agreement with MAS, with Evo, right the way through. So, I think all we can do is focus on what we can control, which is our own ground. But we will continue, obviously, to, once the elections are over, and we do keep a very close contact with the various ministers of mines that are in at the power at the time, and continue those, negotiations in just an open, transparent manner.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. All the exploration you've done, all the results you've done, it's all on your Silver Sands property. You haven't done anything on that MPC land yet. So, it stands for itself. And then, Bolivia, a large percentage of their GDP is mining. And I spoke to one of the analysts who went down there. I haven't had a chance to get down there, hopefully soon, to visit you guys. They in the town of Cerro Rico, they were having a parade, and they had all these little kids dressed up as miners, right? It's just part of the culture. And then, mining, Core had an operation down there. Pan American has an operation down there. And then all the mines are basically being depleted. They need a new mine to, provide jobs to, this community.
No, for sure. I mean, plus minus about 8.5% of GDP is resources or mining related. It's just massive. It's one of the biggest employers in the country at all levels, from kind of family scale right the way up to, much larger operations like San Cristobal. And certainly that is Bolivia's largest mine at the moment. It is in the same department as us, Potosi. So the department officials, they get mining, and they're very keen to see us advance the project. And, published life of mine obviously depends on commodity prices. That's starting to ramp down, another 4 or 5 years. So in theory, subject to ongoing positive results, that could be a great segue for both us with trained workforces out there and the Department of Potosi that, is naturally, perhaps San Cristobal is coming to end of life of mine. This one could be starting off. So there could be a very nice offset out there that would work fantastically for all parties. Right. And that's what you want. You want everyone to benefit, everyone to win.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's going to come down to a negotiation with the government. You want the government to win. You want all the workers to win. You want the community to win. You want the mining company to win regarding profits. So, hopefully you're going to have a successful negotiation regarding your MPC lands, with the government in the future. You just came out with your resource study a few months ago, your maiden resource, 155 million silver ounces at 130 grams a ton. It looked pretty good. It's a big resource.
Yeah, listen, to put that into context, globally, if we look at, open pitable silver discoveries in the last decade, it's the biggest in the terms of both tons and grade. And probably more importantly, in the end of the day, we're at high commodity prices now, but we're looking at a long life of mine here. You want to be multi-cyclical, clearly. Average head grade for silver open pit mines at the moment is about 80 grams per ton, or certainly still 100 grams per ton. For underground mines, it's about 180 grams per ton. So here we are with this, large resource. You can see behind me, kind of in the picture, the background, which is sticking out of the ground, where you're talking about 130 grams per ton. So definitely, very, very encouraging. That should solve, a lot of potential issues. When you're starting up, you always want to, de-risk as much as possible. And I think even within that, when we get into the detail, which is part of the ongoing PEA studies that are in progress at the moment, we will certainly even get higher grade zones within that. So I think there's definitely going to be optionality for higher grade starter pits as well, which again, de-risk that capital, de-risk the project in the early years. So yeah, it's a big one. It's going to get bigger. The deposit's still open. So certainly, I'm sure we'll get into it, but we're hoping to, complete about another 25,000 meters of actually effectively exploration drilling in the second half of this year, because the deposit still remains open. We still haven't found the feeder zone for it, so lots more work to be done, but certainly positive work. I mean, a lot of upside remaining.
Okay, I have a few questions regarding that. You haven't drilled the deep hole yet. I've spoken to Dr. Peter McGaw, right, who's on your board, and he's always looking for the feeder zone, just like he found at Mag and Juanicipio. So when are you going to plug that hole?
Yeah, listen, and absolutely. So the deepest hole to date is maybe about 300 meters, not very deep at all in these systems. I mean, so when we talk pits, that's a kind of shallow depth. Generally in the Bolivian systems, and like you see in Mexico, you always get the higher grade ones in those feeder areas, as Peter would have mentioned. Hoping it'll certainly be this year. We're currently doing our refined targeting, and we think somewhere between our south and central zones is a logical place for a feeder. It's where we get our thickest mineralization, some of the highest grade and more structures in there. So probably Q4 this year, we've got 2 or 3 deep holes planned. But obviously, let's get the rigs turning first, and hopefully, certainly prior to end year.
Now, that area that you're going to drill, that's the low area. Is that the low area that you can kind of see in back of you? Is it the area between the current deposit and Snake Hole? Is that where that drilling, you're going to start the drilling there?
Yeah, it would almost be, sorry, looking back, I could look behind me, but obviously not there. But it is, what we're doing is we're looking north at the moment. So the view from behind me is looking north, and that's the kind of main part. So that's the central deposit, what you're looking at in the background, effectively. I'm virtually standing on the south zone at the moment. And really, it's the area in between these two areas. You can see it drops off. There's a bit of a valley. That's a large structure we think is fundamental in placing the fluids that form the deposit, or one of them potentially. And so it's this area between the two, because that allows us to get deeper straight off the bat. I mean, I think what's interesting as well is we do know there were very high-grade zones here, and that's what the colonials mined. So in the colonial era, hand mining, they were mining these very high-grade feeder zones. Obviously, they've been removed now, so we're left with, the sub-economic, based in, 15th century mining, 16th century mining material that were surrounding those. So we do know these zones did exist. Just in the top couple of 100 meters, they were mined by the colonials. They missed some of them. Look at Snake Hole, for example. But there should be more at depth, and they should. Typically, for a system this size, you would expect them to get bigger and stronger as you get closer to source. Doesn't mean they will, but that's, typically how these systems behave.
And, the high grades are mined were 1 kilo or 2 kilos?
Yeah, something in that, call it, anywhere from 500-600 to a kilo plus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, since you mentioned Snake Hole, that wasn't included in the resource study, right?
No, that was a very late discovery. It was only in Q4 last year, so I just joined, and the guys had hit it prior to that, but the assays just started coming in there. So what that is it's very close to the current defined resource, so it certainly would be captured by any processing plant or whatever. It's only 600 meters away to the east. It is in lower elevation, so again that tells you at lower elevation we are seeing some of these feeder zones potentially, and really there just wasn't enough holes into it, enough holes to declare it as a new discovery, but not enough to put kind of resource around it or shapes around it in 3D. And that's some of the work we're doing now. We did commence drilling it in the first quarter of the year. We should have some results coming back. We drilled about 8 holes into it. Certainly, it looks like it's got some size potential. It's got some legs to it. We'll see what the assays come back with. And then the plan is that's one of the first areas we're going to start drilling when we get the rigs turning, hopefully later on this month. So, the hope is the resource, when it gets updated as part of the PEA study, I'd like to anticipate or expect that the Snake Hole zone should be captured and become part of that updated resource estimate.
Okay. And the Snake Zone, the drilling to date has been wide widths and high grade, even higher than silver sands, right?
Yeah, it's in a slightly lower lithological unit. So basically, the rock fractured. It was less pervasive fracturing. So actually the structure is a little bit tighter, still broad intervals. So you're still getting, call it up to kind of 30 to 50 to 60 meter widths, but not the hundreds of meters so far. Now that can change, that we're seeing on the central zone. But within that, the grades are much higher. And I think that's because the fluids have been focused. So, instead of, let's call it 130 grams per ton, we're getting, 70 meters at kind of 250, 280 grams per ton. And within that, you might get, anywhere from 10 to 30 meters in the kind of 400 to 500 gram per ton range. So certainly smaller damage zone, but higher grade. So you're probably getting more metal, to be honest, or more silver in a smaller area. Right. And the nice thing about that is, and let's see, it's early days yet though, but those type of grades, you're starting to get into what could lend itself to underground mining as well. So if that does continue at depth, if at some point you get below an economic pit depth, if those grades keep up, there may be potential to move to underground extraction methods, but a bit too early to, obviously opine very strongly at this point, but the grades are certainly at least double, if not higher than the current published deposit at this point in time.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So you put a couple holes in there already, you're waiting for results. That 25,000 meters that you're going to drill in the second half, what are you going to how much of that is going to be Snake Hole? How much of that is going to be the other stuff?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, of the 25,000 meters, about 80-85% of it is going to be resource expansion. So, exploration. So not infill drilling, stepping out from the known mineralization. Okay. So hopefully adding it. At Snake Hole itself, we've earmarked a minimum of 4,000 meters to test the Snake Hole zone. Clearly, if we keep hitting, I'm sure subject to board approval, we'll keep those rigs turning. But we think that will give us a pretty good crack at it, and at least give us a feel for it, get our hands around what we may have at Snake Hole. The remaining meterage will be approximately 5,000 meters. We'll test our North Block, or El Bronce zone, and we've been doing a lot of work there. We do know it is clearly another silver-rich polymetallic system, 4 kilometers away from the current deposit. to the north, and probably utilizing the same fractures, the same regional structures. And then the remainder will be all around the silver sand deposit itself, whether it's some of those deep holes we discussed earlier on, or it will be some areas of mineralization that are not currently captured by the conceptual pit. So certainly, if you recall, when we put out a resource estimate and we chatted about this, we have these areas that we call, well, they're undisclosed. So these are areas where, we would have drilled and hit mineralization of the same grade and same interval as currently in the resource estimate, but the drill spacing wasn't tight enough. So instead of having a hole every 100 meters so we could call inferred, maybe the guys only got 1 meter, one hole in before we had to cut off the program. So we just haven't had time to go back and just do more drilling around it. So certainly for me, I'd classify that as very low risk exploration, and we're going to drill, we're going to hit. So certainly the hope is there should be potential to move more tons or more ounces into the inferred category at a very minimum at the end of the program. So, what's ever already, a very large silver deposit, there's a reasonable probability that will continue to grow post this next resource update.
Clarify that a little bit. You said you want to bring more into the inferred category. Is that what you said?
At a minimum, yes. Yeah. So these are areas, mainly actually the area behind me. So most of the drilling focused on the central zone, which makes sense. That's the bulk of the deposit. Small amounts on the south zone, which I'm virtually standing on. But between the two, just for time constraints, there were some holes drilled in. So we know that the mineralization continues from me to the background to the central zone. There has been some holes put into it, but the drill spacing is just not tight enough to classify it as inferred. So effectively, we know the system's there, we know mineralization's there, but we just need to drill some more holes there to tie it together better, and obviously subject to results, assuming we hit similar. But given that we're in the guts of the system, there's a reasonable probability that should occur. That should hopefully add some more inferred tons at a minimum, depends how we drill it off, by the end of that program.
Got it. Yeah, because your inferred tons are only about 10 million tons so far out of total 45 million tons.
Yeah, the board took what is it again a bit unique. I mean, typically for an inaugural resource estimate, you'd expect it mainly to be inferred, right. Pretty much all inferred with a little bit of measured and indicated. But in order to de-risk this, and which is what was allowing us to fast track it from an engineering perspective, about 70% of the current published resource is measured and indicated. So, effectively, that's full mine planning we can do on those tons, which is great. So it does allow us to try and parallel track or fast track some of the engineering studies. So the hope would be, we can get this to a hard production decision as soon as possible.
Right. What's the time frame on the preliminary economic assessment?
Yeah, so we've actually kicked it off at the start of the year. It's been kind of ongoing. Obviously, the met drilling that occurred in January was part of that, those metallurgical drill holes. Realistically, it'll be a H1 of 2021 event. And clearly, what's happening with COVID and shutdowns and travel, that's out of our control. So there is going to be a bit of slop on that, but approximately, call it close to 12 months out. Hopefully we can do it sooner, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Have you gotten any core up to Vancouver yet, to the processing tests?
At this point, no. Actually, we're looking at that. Probably a reasonable. We may look at some other local international labs that we can get the samples to, which are still fully certified ISO labs.
Okay.
So we're looking around at that. I think higher probability we'll probably use a lab in South America. Okay. At this point in time.
All right. One thing regarding your deposit and the open pit, like you can see it in the background, right? You're going to have access to the open pit. It's not going to be like a deep open pit with steep sides. You're going to have access to the ore right from the bottom of the hillside, right?
Yeah, for sure. And this will start to get captured in the PEA study. So, really for your inaugural resource, they just put it's a conceptual. Very much conceptual pit around it. So you just use broad terms. So if you look at that inaugural resource, the strip ratio is effectively 4:1. And that's your final pit, roughly 200 meters deep. But what it doesn't do is go through the phases of the strip. So as you can see behind me, you're correct, Gareth, is, you start mining from behind me into the hill. So effectively in your first, X years, your ratio is very low because there's nothing to strip from the back ratio. So The PEA study will look at that. We'll do some geotechnical drilling. The other thing we do know is the ground is very competent. It's big, massive sandstones that have been fractured. So that should lend itself to a reasonably steep pit wall, which again should lower those strip ratios. So, the work will come out in the PEA study, but it should be a relatively straightforward. And, like I said, even if we didn't find another ounce, which I think is unlikely, it is a relatively shallow pit at about 200 meters final pit depth, plus minus, based on the inaugural resource.
Right. Now, that leads into, the processing. The distribution of the ore between oxides, sulfides, transition, it was what?
Yeah, so obviously we did a lot of work on that. So this is probably the main next technical focus. So broadly speaking, about 15% of the current published resource is oxide, plus minus. About 60% is transitional between oxide and sulfide, but probably more leaning on the sulfide side, to be honest. And then the remainder is as we get deeper, is what you'd expect is fresh mineralization, so sulfide mineralization.
Okay. And then as far as processing, you've done a lot of tests so far. You're still playing off, the heap leach versus, the float circuit, right? Or perhaps a combination of both, or are you leaning towards the heap leach now?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this next phase of metallurgical testing is going to be the critical one. So this is going to be the one that will eliminate the potential, flow sheets. I think what's very interesting about this is a couple of things. One, that it's only silver mineralization, which does make it a very weird beast globally. I mean, normally, you'd have a bit more maybe lead in the system, a bit of zinc, what have you, true polymetallic. So this is really effectively monomineralic at this point in time. But the nice thing about that is, on all the met work done to date, the recoveries are very high, from high 80s to high 90s, no matter what type of, tests you do at it, whether it's a standard flotation, whether it's a leach for, CIL processes or whatever else. So it doesn't look like it's going to pose any huge challenges metallurgically, which gives our met guys a lot of opportunity to look at it. I think the preferred run we're looking at the moment is some type of leach will be the most cost efficient, but recognizing that we need to do that extra test work. So far, based on the work done today, it looks like that is a realistic and potentially favorable option. But, we do, just to stress again, there is a lot more met tests that have to be done before those final decisions are made.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great if you were able to get away with the leach to get your recoveries where you wanted to, because, you won't have to build a big processing facility for a tremendous amount of CapEx. It's going to be hopefully a low upfront CapEx operation.
Yeah, and certainly from an OpEx viewpoint as well, leach pads are reasonably cheap compared to, processing. You're producing a float or a concentrate. So that would also help on the OpEx side as well.
Right.
So like I said, I mean, yeah, I guess cautiously optimistic is probably the best way to look at it at this point in time. But as that work gets done and more results come out, obviously, clearly we'll discuss them at the market and what the implications may be. But we just need to get those met holes to the lab as soon as possible and start that more detailed test work.
Right. Excellent. Is there anything else you want to touch on that we kind of haven't gotten over yet?
I think certainly for me, the exciting thing is, okay, we were an exploration company, now we're an exploration development company, but I wouldn't underestimate the exploration potential. I mean, clearly, yes, a lot of work's going to be going into the engineering, the PEA, our environmental baselines, our social work, and so big programs there as well, which is also critical. It's not just about the engineering side, so definitely big engagement programs with our local communities and stakeholders and building out those teams as well. But from an exploration viewpoint, I mean, it's effectively a brand new silver district, an emerging silver district. I think clearly the silver sand deposit is going to be the anchor of that district. But from what we see now, if we look at that trend, I mean, geologically, whatever was going on, there was a major fluid system here that carried an awful lot of silver, and it's still open for expansion. And so, very excited to get some drill holes into the North Block, our El Bronce target. Again, similar to silver sand pre-drilling in that we've got about historic workings over about a kilometer and a half strike by about 500-600 meters wide. If anything, it looks deeper in the system. It looks like it may be hotter, but certainly clearly is another silver-rich polymetallic system. So we'd like to see, like I said, we'll drill test that second half of the year. We'll see what the rig, the holes come out with. But are we going to hit? Yes. We just don't know how much we're going to hit. And then you couple that with our Silver Strike project, which is a complete standalone. And we've been active on that we've got 6 teams active on that, mapping, sampling at this point in time. Again, that will get its initial drill test in the second half of the year. A lot of analogies to silver sand pre-drilling. So I think it's not are we going to hit, it's just how much we're going to hit, which is always exciting, and not many exploration companies can say that, but certainly we're confident enough to say we are going to hit. There's no doubt about it. It's just how many tons and how many ounces we're going to hit with that drilling. Again, it was a major historic mining district. Okay. In colonial times, probably 1800s, 1800s. But again, they were mining the high-grade veins, a lot of small veining in sandstone, very similar to silver sand pre-drilling. Rio Tinto did some work there in the mid-90s, more looking for copper gold. And they got some interesting results. Certainly, today they got about 70 meters at 0.7 grams gold, which is quite interesting. 2 meters at 1.2 kilograms silver, some nice lead and zinc. So there is a mineralized system there, and really just needs using the silver sand model. I think gives us quite a competitive advantage to try and take a look at that and try and see what the real potential may be on the Silver Strike property.
Right. You guys have been so busy over the past couple of years focusing on silver sands. Now you're just able to kind of take a step back and focus on some other high priority targets.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is we got a very experienced team in Bolivia and here in Vancouver. It's but taking the lessons learned from that and kind of hopefully, well, this one was incredibly fast, but we should be able to hopefully de-risk the next ones as well, just using our knowledge base.
Right. Yeah, that'll be exciting. I followed you for a couple of years. I was following the jury results. The jury results were amazing, right? Like 200 meters width of, sometimes you see that, but it's extremely low grade stuff. You're getting 130 grams a ton. So we're looking forward to, continued exploration success. You guys, the economic studies are going to be coming out soon over the first half of 2021. And then, the metallurgical results. Hopefully you'll be able to just basically leach it all, leading to, strong economics. So we're going to be following you closely over the next few months.
Perfect, Garrett. Appreciate the opportunity to catch up. Okay. And we're going to have to get you to the property soon, whenever, international flights start again.
Yeah, I'd love to. Whenever it clears up, I'll be down. That'd be great. Thanks for the invitation.
That'd be fantastic.
Good.
Okay, cheers.
Thanks, Mark. We'll see you.